Hi Ornament Girls and Guys, and welcome to your free Ornament Girl tutorial. My name is Kennedy, and in this video I'll be showing you how to make the adorable no-sew quilted Jingle Bell ornament pattern. Before we get started, be sure to check the link below the video to download your free printable supply list included with this tutorial. The Jingle Bell ornament pattern was designed by Sherry, and it's made on a mini soft foam ball, and it uses embellishments and fabric to create the look of an adorable festive jingle bell. A quick reminder before we get started, this pattern, along with all Ornament Girl patterns, is copyrighted, and it's illegal to teach or distribute it without our permission. In order to create the Jingle Bell ornament pattern, you are going to need a soft foam ball, pins, fabric, and a few ornament making tools. Be sure to check out the link below the video to grab your free printable supply list that will give you all of the correct quantities and measurements for each of your materials. Once you've got all of your tools and materials gathered, we can begin creating your adorable Jingle Bell ornament. The first thing we're going to do is make a few marks on our foam ball. So the first mark I'm going to make is I'm just going to darken the equator, which is the mold line running around the center of the ball where the two halves meet. This isn't totally necessary, but it does help to be able to keep an eye on your equator as you're creating the ornament. And once we have that equator marked, we're going to use the Ornament Girl paper strip method to divide our foam ball into 4 equal segments and get the pole marking on each side. So you want to cut a strip of paper. I'm just using regular printer paper here. You want to cut a strip of paper that's about 1/4 inch wide, and you're going to lay this strip of paper right along the equator line on your foam, and you can pin one end in place. And then you're going to wrap this paper strip around the equator until you return to the starting point. And what you want to do is trim your strip so that it is just long enough to wrap all the way around the ball. So I'm going to find the point here where the ends of my paper strip are just meeting. I'm just creating a little fold there right where the end of my paper strip is. Now you can remove that paper strip. Go ahead and trim the strip so that it's just the length needed to wrap around the ball. And once you have that strip trimmed to the correct length, you're going to fold it in half twice. So I'm putting the ends together and creasing that fold, and then doing that a second time. And this is going to divide our strip into 4 segments. You can unfold that strip, and now you'll see those little fold lines creating dash marks around the strip, and I'm just going to darken them because it will be easier to see once we put this paper back on our ornament. So you can see along those fold lines I've made my little marks, which is dividing my strip into 4 equal segments. And now you can pin this right back along the equator just like we had it before. So I'm pinning one end in place and wrapping centered over that equator line, and then pinning the other end in place as well. And now you're going to use your pen to make a couple more marks on the foam. So right here at the starting and stopping point where the ends of your strip meet, you want to make a dash on the foam right above and right below the paper strip. And then we're going to do the same thing at each of the 3 dash marks on the paper template. So wherever there's a dash mark on the template, I'm adding those same marks to my foam ball. And once you have those marks made, you can remove the paper template. And now what we're going to do is connect these lines to give us 4 equal segments. So on one half of the ball here, I'm going to connect 2 opposite dash marks straight across the foam ball using the edge of my flexible tape measure as a straight edge, connecting 2 opposite dash marks in a straight line. And then you're going to use that straight edge to draw the line, connecting those dash marks all the way across the foam. Now go ahead and repeat that for the second set of opposite dash marks. And once you have those 2 segment lines made, you've divided your ball into 4 segments, and the point where these lines are intersecting creates the pole marking on this half of the ball. Now you're just going to flip the ball over and do the same process to connect your opposite dash marks on the second side. And you can see one of my lines got a little off track here, but that's okay. I got it back on track to connect these segment lines. So now that we have our foam markings made on both sides of the ball, we can begin adding our fabric pieces. The Jingle Bell ornament pattern is based off the same construction as our classic basic star quilted ornament. So if you've made a few of our no-sew quilted ornaments before, you'll be pretty familiar with these folds and the construction of the Jingle Bell pattern. But if this is your first time making a no-sew quilted ornament, you'll be learning one of our most common folding techniques here, which is the basic triangle fold. The way you're going to make this fold is hold your 2 by 3 inch rectangle of fabric horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you, and fold the top edge down. In this pattern, we can fold it down about 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch, but you don't have to be exact about that amount. Now fold it in half the opposite way and crease just to find the center of the piece. Unfold and place a pin along that center crease just a hair below the top folded edge. So I'm keeping my pin right along that center line and pinning right below the top folded edge of the piece. On one side of your foam ball, you are going to pin this along one of these segment lines that you drew right into the pole marking. So right into that point where all of the segment lines meet. And now we're going to create a basic triangle fold. So pinch the left half of the fabric and fold it straight down. Now pinch the right half of the fabric and fold it straight down, just overlapping that left side a tiny bit, enough that you could use one pin at the bottom center to hold both halves in place. And now before pinning this down, you want to swivel your piece on that top center pin, adjusting your piece until the center line of your triangle is directly in line with the segment line on the foam. And once you're all lined up, you're going to pin at the bottom center and smooth out and pin at the left and right corners. And you can keep these pins about 1/4 of an inch above that equator line because we'll be covering them with our future fabric layers. So again, I'm just smoothing out my left and right corners, and when I pin them in place, I'm keeping my pin about 1/4 of an inch above that equator line around the center of the ball. Now we're going to go ahead and prep our next piece of fabric. With another rectangle, you're going to hold this horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you. Fold the top edge down 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch and crease the fold. Fold in half the opposite way and crease to find the center of the piece. Unfold and pin right along that center crease, just a hair below the top folded edge. And this is how you're going to prep all of your fabric pieces for this ornament. So instead of showing you over and over, I'll just begin to say go ahead and prep your next piece. This is how you're going to prepare all of the fabric pieces for the rest of these layers. Now we're going to work directly across from the piece that you just placed. So we're working along the same segment line directly across from the piece you just placed, pinning along the line and right into the pole marking. Fold the left half straight down and the right half straight down, just overlapping the left. And then make sure the center line of your triangle is in line with the segment line on the foam. And you can swivel it on that top pin if you need to get everything lined up. Pin at the bottom center and the left and right corners of the piece, keeping your pins about 1/4 of an inch above that equator line running all the way around the ball. Go ahead and repeat those exact same steps to add a basic triangle fold to these remaining 2 segment lines on the foam pinned right there at the pole marking. Once you've added all 4 basic triangles, you want to make sure there aren't any foam gaps showing between your pieces, and once all 4 of those pieces are placed, layer 1 is complete. Layer 2 is made up of 4 basic triangles just like in layer 1, so you're going to prep your pieces in the exact same way. But this time we aren't pinning at the pole marking, we're going to be measuring down from the top center point. So you can go ahead and add a marker pin to the top center of your ornament. So right there at the pole marking, I'm just pushing a pin in about halfway, and this just gives us a consistent point to measure from. So using your flexible tape measure, you're going to measure from that top center pin down along the center line of one of the triangles, which is also the segment line on the foam. So I'm measuring from the top center pin down along that center line and making sure that you're keeping your pin directly along the segment line and the center line of the triangle. You're going to pin at the 3/8 inch mark. So my pin is going 3/8 of an inch below the pole marking, pinned along the segment line, and now you're just going to create your piece in the exact same way, folding the left half straight down and the right half straight down, and then making sure that your center line is in line with that segment line on the foam. And this time when you pin, you want to keep your pins right above that equator line. So you can always peel your fabric back, and you can see I pinned a little high here. I want to be not right along the equator, but just above it if you can. So right there, right above that equator line. And then you're going to smooth out the left and right corners and do the same with those. When you pin those edges in place, you're keeping your pins right above that equator line on the foam. And that is how we're going to add all of the pieces for this layer. So go ahead and prep your next piece of fabric. And now moving to the next segment line, it doesn't really matter which segment line you go to next. I'm just going to move to the right. You are going to measure down from the center pole marking, that marker pin at the center of the ornament. Measure down along the segment line, which is also the center line of the triangle from the previous layer, and pin right along that line 3/8 of an inch below the top center point. Create your basic triangle, keeping the center line directly along the segment line on the foam. And then pin in place at the bottom center and the left and right edges, keeping those pins right above that equator line. Go ahead and repeat those exact same steps to add a basic triangle fold on top of the remaining 2 triangles from layer 1, centered with the segment lines on the foam. Once you have added all 4 triangles, the first half of layer 2 is finished. But before we add our next 4 pieces, you might just want to trim off the fabric that's extending beyond the equator line. It'll make it easier to see that equator as we add our final 4 pieces of fabric. So I'm just carefully trimming away any fabric extending beyond that equator line at the center of the ornament. And now we're going to add 4 more triangles, this time sitting in between the 4 that we already placed. So go ahead and prep another piece of fabric in the exact same way. And this time when you measure to place your piece, you're going to be measuring down from that center pin, this time directly along the line between 2 triangles from layer 1, and you're still pinning at the 3/8 inch mark. You're just pinning centered between 2 triangles, and then you're going to create your basic triangle fold in the exact same way, creating a straight line that sits centered between 2 triangle folds. And you also want to make sure that the little points that your piece is creating here are symmetrical. So you can see here when I'm off center, this point comes down a lot further than this one does. So when you center your piece, that star shape or those little points there are symmetrical. And you're going to pin at the bottom center and the left and right edges, always being sure to keep those pins right above that segment line, which is why we trimmed off that fabric, because it's a lot easier to see. And we're just going to do that for our remaining pieces for this layer. So go ahead and prep another piece of fabric. And then moving to the next line that sits between the 2 triangles you've already placed on this layer, you're going to measure down from the center pin directly along that line, pin at the 3/8 inch mark, create a basic triangle fold just like you're used to from the previous pieces, and then make sure it sits centered, creating symmetrical points between those 2 triangle folds, and then pin at the bottom center and left and right corners, keeping your pins just above that equator line. Go ahead and repeat those exact same steps to add a basic triangle between the remaining 2 sets of triangles placed in layer 2. Once you've added all 4 triangles, you can remove the marker pin at the center and go ahead and trim away the fabric extending beyond that equator line. And once that is all trimmed up, side 1 of our little jingle bell ornament is complete, and we're going to flip the ball over and complete those exact same steps on side 2. Since side 2 is done the exact same way as side 1, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of each set of 4 triangles. But if you find yourself wanting the more in-depth breakdown of each piece, you can go back to the layer 1 section from side 1 and just complete those same steps on side 2 here. So for the first layer, go ahead and place 4 basic triangle folds pinned along the segment lines on the foam right at the pole marking. Once you have added those 4 basic triangle folds, layer 1 is complete, and you can place a marker pin pushed in about halfway at the top center of the ornament. If you can find a spot where you aren't hitting the pin heads from layer 1, there you go. All right, I have my marker pin at the top center. Now to begin layer 2, you are going to pin a basic triangle fold centered on top of the 4 folds from layer 1, each pinned 3/8 of an inch from that top center pin. And even though our segment lines are covered now, you can use the center lines of the triangles from side 1 and side 2 to locate your segment lines. So go ahead and place those first 4 triangles pinned 3/8 of an inch from the top center. Once you've added those 4 triangles, you can carefully trim away the fabric extending beyond the equator. And when you are trimming on side 2, you want to be very careful that you aren't accidentally cutting any of your finished pieces from side 1 of the ornament. So just be very aware of where the tips of your scissors are as you're cutting. And once that is trimmed up, we just have 4 triangles left to add. So just like we did on side 1, you're now going to add a triangle centered in between the triangles you've already placed along each of these lines between triangles from layer 1, pinned 3/8 of an inch from the center pin, and keeping your pins right above that equator line. Go ahead and add those 4 triangles now. Once you've added those final 4 triangles, go ahead and carefully trim away the fabric extending beyond the equator. And once that's all trimmed up, you can remove your marker pin. And now all we need to do to finish off the fabric pieces is add a band to cover these raw edges and pins. With your long skinny strip of fabric, hold this with the pattern side facing away from you and fold it in thirds lengthwise. So I'm folding each long raw edge in toward the center, and you do want to make sure that this is wide enough that when it's on your ornament, it's covering the raw edges and pins. So if you need to widen it up a little bit, you can just pull those edges out from the center. And you may not be able to fold the entire piece at once, and that's totally okay. We can just work with a few inches at a time. But once you fold your little band into thirds, you're going to hold this with the raw edges facing away from you, and then lay your band centered over the raw edges and pins around the equator of the ornament, and use 2 pins to hold the short end in place. And then keeping your band folded, you're going to wrap it all the way around the center of the ornament, covering those raw edges and pins as you go. And you want to pull tight enough that your band lays nice and smooth, but not so tightly that you're distorting the pattern on the fabric. Now, once you've got your band covering all of those raw edges and pins, right here before the starting point, you are going to use a couple of temporary pins to hold the band in place. So before that starting point, you're going to add 2 temporary pins. They only need to be pushed in about halfway. And then you're going to bring your band a 1/2 inch past that starting point, and then trim any extra fabric beyond that. So here's my starting point. I'm coming out 1/2 of an inch and trimming the rest of the fabric. And now we're going to use the hidden pin trick to finish off our band without any raw edges showing. So you're going to take the short edge of your band and fold it underneath the rest of the piece, creating a folded edge there that's hiding all of the raw edges underneath the band. And now all we need to do is hide our pins inside that band as well. So right here at that fold you just created, you're going to tuck your pin underneath the top layer of fabric and pin just into the bottom layer. Push that pin in all the way and then bring the top layer of fabric out and around to cover that pin head. And then we're going to do the same thing along the other edge. So I'm just tucking my pin under the top layer of the fabric, catching that bottom layer, and then bringing the top layer of fabric out and around. And now those pins are hidden, and you can remove the temporary pins. And now that is all of the fabric pieces for our Jingle Bell ornament, and we can begin adding our embellishments. So the first thing we're going to do is create that little cross section at the bottom of the ornament that makes it look like an open jingle bell there at the bottom. So with your 2.5-inch piece of ribbon, you're going to fold this in half. So I'm just putting the ends right together. And then you're going to cut at that center point so that you have 2 equal pieces of ribbon. And when you pin these onto your ornament, you want to use black pins threaded with black sequins. So I'm just threading a black sequin onto my black straight pin here. And on one side of your ornament where that star shape is showing, you are just going to center your piece of ribbon along one of the lines that is the center lines of those triangles from layer 1 and 2. And once you have that centered, you're going to pin each end in place using a black pin threaded with a black sequin, and that will give us the look of the little holes at the bottom of the jingle bell there. So go ahead and pin your second piece of ribbon directly across the first piece using your black pins and black sequins. And once you've added those embellishments to the bottom of the jingle bell, all that's left to do is decorate the top of the ornament. So you could use any bow or hanger style that you want on the top of the ornament. I'll show you how to add greenery and a little bow and hanger just like I did here. But if you're looking for some more embellishment ideas, be sure to check out the embellishment library on the Ornament Girl website. Like I said, you can decorate yours however you'd like, but I'll walk you through these simple steps included in this pattern. The first thing you want to do is add your little greenery sprig to the top center of your ornament. So you're just going to lay your sprig across the top center. I'm putting the folded edge of my band at the back of the ornament. You're going to lay your piece of greenery across the top center, and then just use a small U-pin right over the stem to hold it in place. And now we can add our ribbon bow and hanger right on top of that. So I'm going to go ahead and add a bow similar to this one, just using a long piece of ribbon to create a bow shape, but I wanted to show you an alternative option. On this silver jingle bell, I used our gift bow style bow to make lots of loops for the bow on top of my ornament. So like I said, you can check out the Ornament Girl website for some different bow making and embellishment ideas. But for this ornament, I'm just going to cut a piece of ribbon that measures, I don't know, maybe about 8 inches. I'm not being exact about that, but I'm just cutting a piece of ribbon here. And you can loop that ribbon around to make a loop at the top with 2 strands at the bottom, and then bring that top loop down to meet the center point. And just like that, you've got this adorable little bow shape. And you can pin right through that center point, holding all pieces of the bow together, and then just pin this near the top center of your ornament. It doesn't have to be perfect because we do have a lot of layers we're pinning through there, but I'm just pinning that bow to the top center of my ornament, and now all that's left to do is add a hanger. To add my hanger, I'm just going to use a 10-inch piece of string here, put the ends together and tie a knot. And then using a pearl head pin threaded with a bead cap, go ahead and pin right through the knot on that hanger string. And if you want to trim off these little extra pieces, you can. This string tends to fray a lot, so I'm going to trim off those extra little bits. And then bringing my string out on either side of that bead cap, I'm going to even that out. And then just pin this right into the top center of my ornament, covering any of those pins that are still showing at the center. And that adds a little bit more embellishment and a perfect way to hang your little jingle bell. Now, of course, if there are any other embellishments you want to add, such as beads, sequins, or even some sparkly trim, you can feel free to add any extra little touches to your jingle bell that you'd like. And once you've added all of those embellishments, your jingle bell ornament is complete. I did want to mention just a couple of great ideas from our designer, Sherry, who designed this pattern. She did mention that you could string 2 jingle bell ornaments together on the same hanger to have a pair of jingle bells, or it would be fun to even string them on different lengths and hang them all together, or string them across on a garland. So you could make lots of these little jingle bell ornaments and string them up together or add them together in decorations however you'd like. I hope you really enjoyed making this adorable little Jingle Bell Christmas ornament along with me, and I can't wait to see how all of your Christmas ornaments turn out. Be sure to subscribe to the Ornament Girl on YouTube for more free no-sew quilted ornament tutorials. Thanks so much for watching.